All right, today we're cracking open a truly wild, declassified file. It's about a weapon, but not one that shoots bullets or launches missiles. This thing weaponizes philosophy itself to just switch off the will to fight. We're diving into the story of Project Wille and its bizarre creation, the Pale Cynic.
So let's start with the big question, the one that probably kept Cold War generals up at night. Forget about nukes, forget about tanks. What if you could create something that ends a war just by showing up? It sounds like something from science fiction, right? Well, according to these files, someone actually tried to build it.
The way this thing works is just deeply creepy. There's no bang, no screaming. Imagine a full-blown battle, absolute chaos, and then, in an instant, total silence. Soldiers just stop. They drop their guns. The fight just vanishes from their minds. The whole point of being there is erased.
So what in the world is behind this? Well, the file gives it a name and a brand new classification, which is just awesome. Meet the Pale Cynic, a specter philosophical entity. Yeah, we're going to have to unpack that one.
And this is absolutely crucial to get. This isn't your typical ghost, the spirit of a person. No. The Pale Cynic is way weirder. It's literally an idea that's been turned into a weapon. It's a ghost made out of pure negation, out of the very concept of saying no to everything.
So, if you want to understand what makes this thing tick, you got to look at its philosophical DNA. It's basically a mashup of two of history's major league downers. You've got Diogenes, the original Greek cynic, who basically told society to get lost. And then you've got Schopenhauer, the master of pessimism, who was convinced that life is just suffering. You mix those two together, you get a ghost that doesn't just reject reality, it tells you why reality sucks.
And this is where it gets really wild, because these philosophies aren't just ideas. They have a physical, spectral form. The cynic has three key artifacts. First, the lantern of anti-light. It doesn't shine light, it shines truth. It hits a soldier and boof, all their heroic ideals are gone, and they just see themselves as a scared animal. Then there's the pithos, or the barrel, which is basically a portal to its own depressing dimension. And my personal favorite, the Atman null, a spectral poodle. This dog radiates this vibe of pure, thoughtless existence, making you want to just give up on all that complicated human thinking.
Okay, so you've got a grumpy ghost with a truth lantern and a psychic poodle. How in the world do you turn that into an effective weapon that can stop an army in its tracks?
Its main weapon is something called the aura of pessimism. Think of it like a bubble of reality that it projects around itself. And inside this bubble, its bleak, depressing worldview becomes the only truth. It doesn't hurt you physically. It just rewrites the software in your brain, deleting all your motivations, all your beliefs.
And what's the core message it's beaming into everyone's head? It's pure Schopenhauer. The idea is that life is just a pendulum, swinging back and forth between two states, pain and boredom. You're either fighting and suffering, or you're not fighting and you're bored out of your skull. That's it. There's no winning, no happily ever after.
And you can see here just how devastating that is. A soldier normally thinks, I'm fighting for my country. Inside the aura, that thought becomes, well, I guess fighting is less boring than not fighting. Firing your weapon, an act with meaning, becomes just a meaningless twitch. And getting hurt? It's not a reason to fight for your life. It's just reality reminding you that everything is pain. So why bother?
And that right there is the checkmate. See, the soldiers don't surrender. Surrender still admits the whole thing had a point. Instead, they fall into what the file calls combat catatonia. The will to fight, the will to do anything, just poof, it's gone. The whole concept of a battle just dissolves. So where did this monster of an idea come from? It didn't just crawl out of some philosophical swamp. Oh no, it was built. And that brings us to the really juicy part of the file, the origin story, codenamed Project Wille.
You really have to put this in the context of the times, this crazy psychic arms race during the Cold War. You've probably heard of the UK's Project Zarathustra, right? They were trying to build a literal Superman. Well, the West Germans were playing a totally different game. They weren't after a guy who could punch through a tank. They wanted to create a being who could just talk the tank driver into giving up on life. And the story of Project Wille is just a tragedy. It started out with this incredibly optimistic goal to create a psychic being called Dr. Optimus, who would be a beacon of hope. But the guy running the show, codenamed Director Mephisto, subtle, was a total nihilist.
He secretly messed with the experiment, injecting all this despair and contradiction into it, and when the subject finally broke, he whispered the trigger word Wille, which means will in German, and boom. Instead of Dr. Optimus, they got the Pale Cynic.
And listen to this. This is from director Mephisto's own notes. It's a quote from Faust. "I am the spirit that denies." He wasn't just doing a job, he was on a mission. He believed all that hope and optimism was a sham, and he was determined to create a weapon that would prove his dark, cynical point to the entire world. And this final quote from him says it all. As his creation was born, he basically said, "The Brits can have their superhero, we have the shadow that eats the light." He didn't see it as a failed project. For him, it was a total success. He had created the ultimate anti-Superman.
Now, the Pale Cynic doesn't just wander around our world. It has its own home turf, a pocket dimension the files call the realm of Geist. And get this, it's a place literally built out of sadness and philosophical gloom.
The landscape there is just a mood. You've got a sea of fog that represents the edge of what humans can even understand. There are ruins everywhere, but they were built to be ruins from day one. And get this, there are forests where your own internal monologue just gets louder and louder until it's deafening. The whole place is basically an anxiety attack you can walk through.
And the animals there? They're living ideas. You've got the Alp, a creature whose whole job is to crush your spirit if you start feeling too happy. There's the Periton, a monster that casts a human shadow, basically telling you that you're the real monster. Even the Keelan, which is supposed to be a symbol of good luck, is just a ghost, a reminder of a hope that never showed up.
So, how on earth do you fight something like this? A weapon powered by pure logical despair? Well, the answer is completely ridiculous. The entire system is built on this kind of serious, heavy philosophy, so it has a major weakness: things that make no sense. The files say that pure absurdity, something totally surreal, like a lemon, can actually disrupt its power. Yeah, a lemon. You can't make this stuff up. Which leaves us with a really unsettling final thought. The fact that a weapon like this could even work, that it's so effective just by showing people that their actions might be futile, well, it forces you to ask a tough question. If pure, weaponized despair is a viable weapon, what does that say about the reality we're all fighting so hard to defend in the first place?